Travis Henry's cocaine empire. Travis Henry was supposed to be a redemption story, a small-town kid from Frostproof, Florida, who bulldozed his way to NFL stardom, but behind the touchdowns and highlight reels, Henry was building something far darker. After his playing days faded, he secretly became the ringleader of a massive cocaine trafficking network spanning multiple states. The same aggression that made him unstoppable on the field fueled his criminal empire off it. When federal agents finally caught him in 2008, they discovered Henry owed millions in child support, 11 kids with 10 different women, and was using drug money to stay afloat. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, a fall so dramatic it stunned the league. Once the pride of the Buffalo Bills, Henry became the embodiment of wasted potential and self-destruction. His story isn't just about bad decisions. It's about how fame can feed delusion, convincing athletes they're invincible long after the whistle blows. Henry didn't just lose his career. He lost himself chasing a high far deadlier than football. Eugene Robinson's Super Bowl arrest. The night before the biggest game of his life, Falcons safety Eugene Robinson stood on a stage accepting the Athlete of the Year award for character, leadership, and integrity. Hours later, he was in handcuffs for soliciting an undercover cop posing as a prostitute. The timing was surreal. He'd been celebrated for morality, then publicly humiliated before kickoff. The Falcons were blindsided, the media pounced, and Robinson still suited up the next day against the Broncos. He missed key tackles, gave up a touchdown, and the Falcons were blown out. That one night erased a decade of respect. Robinson's fall wasn't about crime. It was about hypocrisy, the contrast between image and reality. The NFL loves clean narratives, but this one couldn't be polished. A team on the brink of history was undone by one reckless choice. Robinson later rebuilt his reputation as a broadcaster, but that Super Bowl night still lingers like an asterisk on his legacy. The lesson? Sometimes your lowest moment arrives right before the spotlight hits. Barret Robbins' Super Bowl disappearance. It's one of the strangest moments in NFL history. An all-pro center vanishing in the middle of the Super Bowl. Barret Robbins was the emotional core of the 2002 Raiders, but on the eve of their championship game, he simply disappeared. His teammates searched everywhere. No calls, no clues, no answers. Hours later, Robbins was found incoherent in Mexico, disoriented and manic. He'd stopped taking his bipolar medication, his mind spiraling as pressure mounted. Without him, the Raiders' offensive line collapsed, and the team was demolished by the Buccaneers. The media mocked him, but the truth was darker. Robbins was battling an illness the league barely understood. His story became a cautionary tale about untreated mental health in sports. Years later, he admitted he didn't even remember the Super Bowl. He'd been fighting for survival in his own head, while millions watched the game he never played. Robbins didn't choke under pressure. He was consumed by it, and the NFL was forced to confront the cost of ignoring the human behind the helmet. Tom Payne's life behind bars. Tom Payne's name has been nearly erased from sports history, and for good reason. He was a basketball prodigy who briefly tried to cross into football, but his legacy isn't athletic, it's criminal. After a short stint with the Falcons practice squad, Payne spiraled into one of the most horrifying double lives imaginable. Over the years, he was convicted of multiple violent assaults, with investigators calling him a serial predator. He spent decades in and out of prison, serving multiple life sentences for crimes too disturbing to air on TV. What makes his story chilling isn't just the brutality, it's how close he came to being a sports icon before everything collapsed. Payne's name became synonymous with wasted talent and unimaginable evil. ESPN never mentions him, the NFL pretends he never existed, and fans who stumble on his story are stunned that someone once on an NFL roster could become one of the nation's most dangerous criminals. Tom Payne didn't just ruin his life, he corrupted the Dream Millions chase. Travis Rudolph's murder trial. Travis Rudolph had it all: NFL talent, family charm, and a viral reputation as the player who once ate lunch with a lonely autistic boy. But years later, that image shattered. In 2021, Rudolph was charged with murder after a late-night altercation at his home turned deadly. According to reports, his ex-girlfriend had sent a group of men to confront him, and in the chaos, Rudolph fired multiple shots as they fled, killing one. The case exploded across social media. Supporters said it was self-defense. Prosecutors called it revenge. The courtroom drama felt like a morality play on fame, anger, and fear. After 2 years of legal warfare, Rudolph was found not guilty, but his reputation never recovered. Once praised for kindness, he became a symbol of how quickly life can turn when emotions and firearms mix. Rudolph's case reminded fans that redemption and ruin often share the same stage. And in the NFL, image is everything. But what happened next would take darkness to another level. Quintin Jones's final execution. Quintin Jones never became a star, but his name is etched in NFL lore for all the wrong reasons. Once a Cowboys practice squad player, Jones's life spiraled into addiction and violence after football ended. In 1999, he was convicted of murdering his great aunt during a robbery gone wrong. For over 20 years, he sat on death row in Texas, pleading for mercy. In 2021, his final message went viral, a haunting, soft-spoken plea for forgiveness and a chance at redemption. Celebrities and activists campaigned for clemency, but the governor refused. Jones was executed hours later, his death live-streamed through headlines that barely mentioned his football past. His story wasn't about fame, it was about forgotten lives, broken by pressure, poverty, and pain. The NFL never acknowledged him, and fans barely knew he existed. But his case exposed how easily players disappear once the spotlight fades. Quintin Jones didn't die as an athlete, he died as a man the league had already erased. Justin's fiery death. Justin Strzelczyk was a Pittsburgh cult hero. Tough, funny, and always up for a fight. But in 2004, his life ended in a fireball on a New York highway. He drove his pickup at over 90 miles per hour, swerving through traffic, pursued by police for 40 miles before crashing into a tanker truck. The explosion was so violent that investigators first thought it was a suicide. Later, they discovered signs of paranoia and brain damage, likely caused by years of undiagnosed CTE. Strzelczyk had been convinced he was being followed by evil forces. Friends said he'd grown obsessed with religion, conspiracy, and the afterlife. His death became one of the earliest warnings of what repeated head trauma could do to the human mind. The Steelers community mourned, but the NFL moved on in silence. Strzelczyk's fiery end wasn't just tragic, it was prophetic. He became a symbol of the invisible injuries no helmet could stop. But first, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button before we go any further. Joe Gilliam's forgotten fall. Before Terry Bradshaw, before the dynasty, there was Joe Gilliam, a man who broke barriers and then disappeared into history. In 1973, he became the first black quarterback to start an NFL season opener, lighting up defenses with pinpoint accuracy. But racism and resentment followed him everywhere. When he struggled, critics blamed his lifestyle, not the league's prejudice. Eventually, he lost his job and turned to drugs, living on the streets of Nashville for years. By the time he died in 2000, few even knew his name. The same NFL that once celebrated his courage never mentioned his downfall. Gilliam's story isn't about failure, it's about neglect. He opened doors others walked through, yet none looked back. He could have been a star, but the system wasn't ready to let him be one. Joe Gilliam didn't fade away because he wasn't good enough. He faded because the league, and the world around it, never gave him the chance to survive after the lights went out. Dimitri Patterson's Courthouse Meltdown. Dimitri Patterson was never a household name, but his NFL career was solid, undrafted, disciplined, a grinder who worked his way into starting roles for the Dolphins and Jets. But his story took an unbelievable turn in 2019. During a custody hearing in Florida, Patterson suddenly leapt over a courtroom railing and bolted for the exit. Officers tried to stop him, but he crashed into them, injuring 2 deputies in the process. The scene was chaos. Papers flying, guards shouting, Patterson sprinting like it was a kickoff return. He was caught shortly after, charged with resisting arrest and battery on law enforcement. The video spread across social media like wildfire. Fans couldn't believe it. How did a quiet journeyman turn into a viral courtroom fugitive? The meltdown exposed something deeper, a man cracking under years of stress, fame, and financial strain. Patterson vanished from public life after that, his career buried under one of the strangest NFL headlines ever. He didn't just lose control, he lost reality itself. And the next story shows that downfall can go even darker. David Meggett's life sentence. David Meggett was once one of the NFL's most electrifying players, a dynamic return man for the Giants and Patriots who made defenders look foolish. But after retirement, his life took a sinister turn. Accusations of assault began piling up, each one more disturbing than the last. In 2010, he was convicted of a brutal attack that left a woman hospitalized, sealing his fate with a 30-year prison sentence. The same man who danced through defenses was now sitting in a cell, stripped of everything. What makes his story so haunting is how invisible it became. Barely covered, quietly buried under newer scandals. The NFL moved on, pretending one of its former stars hadn't descended into horror. For fans who remembered his highlight reels, the contrast was staggering. Meggett's life is the blueprint of wasted talent turned nightmare, proof that even legends can hide monsters within. And just when you think you've heard the darkest stories, there's one that might be even more tragic. Todd Marinovich's manufactured collapse. Todd Marinovich was never raised. He was built. His father, a former NFL lineman, designed him in a lab of discipline and obsession. No sugar, no junk food, no childhood, just football. By the time he was a teenager, he was already being called Robo QB. The problem was, Todd didn't love the game, he feared it. When he finally reached the NFL, the pressure shattered him. Drugs became his escape. Arrests followed, narcotics, trespassing, bizarre public incidents. One photo showed him completely naked, crouched in the street, high and broken. He spent decades cycling through rehab and relapse, his potential suffocated by perfection. His story became one of the most disturbing sports parables ever told. A man robbed of identity before he even had one. Marinovich wasn't ruined by fame. He was ruined by the obsession that created him. His father wanted the perfect quarterback. What he got was proof that you can't engineer greatness without destroying the human underneath it. Chris Henry's final drive, Chris Henry was supposed to turn his life around. The Bengals receiver had fought his way back from suspensions, fines, and chaos, finally finding stability and a family. But in 2009, everything unraveled. After an argument with his fiancée, Henry jumped into the back of her moving pickup truck as she tried to drive away. Witnesses said he begged her to stop. Seconds later, he fell from the bed, striking the pavement, and was pronounced dead hours later. He was only 26. The autopsy revealed something shocking. Henry had advanced CTE, the brain disease usually seen in aging veterans. He was one of the first active players ever diagnosed. His death changed how the NFL viewed concussions, but it came too late for him. Henry's story isn't about violence or scandal. It's about how pain hides behind smiles. He wasn't evil, he was broken, and his final drive became a symbol of everything football refuses to talk about. Kevin Allen's criminal downfall. Kevin Allen was supposed to be a franchise cornerstone, the Eagles' first-round pick in 1985, but just 1 year later, his life disintegrated. He tested positive for drugs, got suspended, and fell into addiction. Then came the crime that destroyed him, a conviction for assault so severe it landed him in prison for years. The NFL cut ties instantly, and Allen became a cautionary tale for every rookie who thought talent could cover chaos. After his release, he tried to rebuild, driving trucks and living quietly, but the stigma followed forever. The same league that once hailed him as the next great tackle now refused to acknowledge his name. His story shows how quickly glory can rot into infamy. 1 year you're shaking the commissioner's hand, the next you're shackled in a courtroom. Kevin Allen's downfall wasn't dramatic. It was slow, ugly, and absolute, and it set the stage for a disappearance that few even noticed coming. Sam Rayburn's Vanishing act. Sam Rayburn was a grinder, the kind of lineman who earned his paycheck through grit, not glory. He played for the Eagles, gave everything to the game, and then vanished. After retirement, Rayburn drifted into obscurity, battling painkillers, depression, and financial collapse. Years later, local reporters found him living out of his truck in Oklahoma, unrecognizable from the player fans once cheered for. His hands were mangled from surgeries, his speech slurred from concussions. The NFL's billion-dollar machine had no room for him anymore. His story isn't about crime or violence, it's about abandonment. A league that celebrates toughness forgot what happens when that toughness breaks. Rayburn's quiet tragedy exposes a truth darker than any scandal. Most fallen players don't make headlines. They just fade away, forgotten by teams, ignored by fans, and left wondering if all those hits were worth it. But the next story shows a man who didn't fade. He transformed into something far worse. Robert Rozier's murder cult. Robert Rozier's story feels like a movie script written in madness. A defensive lineman drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals in 1979, he had the size, skill, and swagger to succeed. But after leaving the league, he fell into a cult led by the Nation of Yahweh, a group later tied to multiple murders. Rozier admitted to killing at least 7 people on their orders, targeting those the cult called evil. When he was caught, he testified against the group's leader to save his own life. He entered witness protection under a new name, but his violence didn't stop. He was later arrested again for fraud while in hiding. Rozier's path from NFL player to self-proclaimed soldier for God remains one of the most disturbing transformations in sports history. He went from sacking quarterbacks to hunting strangers in the name of a twisted belief. Robert Rozier isn't just one of the darkest figures in football. He's proof that evil can wear a jersey too. If you like this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you're going to really love.